Is 29th of April, and let's begin with the Hindu analysis. So let's begin with the first news for today, the first important news. That's about UAE leaving OPEC and OPEC Plus in a huge blow to global oil producers group. So very recently, just yesterday, this news came in that UAE has left OPEC and OPEC Plus. So what impact is it going to have on the global oil production? What impact is it going to have on India? So we'll discuss these things. And why did the UAE leave? So UAE has been saying that whatever the crisis that's going in West Asia, like US, Iran, Israel war, Iran also attacked UAE, and UAE said that it did not get the required support from the Arab group that it was looking for. It did not receive the Arab solidarity in that case, and that's why UAE felt that it should not be a part of such organizations of OPEC and OPEC Plus. Now this is coming in at a time when the world is already facing a global oil crisis because of all the escalation that is ongoing in West Asia, because of the issues that are happening in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. So with in such a backdrop, when such an important global oil producer leaves these this oil cartel, then it raises some important questions that what is going to happen, like what will be the future of global oil production. So first things first, let's first understand what is OPEC and OPEC Plus. So OPEC is the organization for petroleum exporting countries. So it's about the petroleum exporting countries, right? Now this was formed in the 1960s. This was formed in 1960, and then it had 5 founding members. So we had Venezuela, Iraq, Kuwait, Iran and Saudi Arabia. That's Venezuela, Iraq, Kuwait, Iran and Saudi Arabia. So these are the major oil producing countries in the world, right? So these countries, it's like the oil cartel, that these countries, they decided to come together and they said that we will decide, or we'll set these production quotas on how much of production of these how much oil should all these countries produce, and what should they generate as the output, how much should they sell to the world, how much should they sell to the global market. So it's like deciding the production of oil, and whatever the production of oil will be, that in turn is going to decide the global oil prices. If the production is going to be very high, like if a huge amount of oil is being produced, then the prices of oil, global oil, is going to come down. And it is very restricted. If the production is going to be very limited, in that case we are going to see a surge in the global oil prices. So that's why these things, like these organizations, the OPEC actually became very, very important, because this was the global oil cartel, the core oil cartel. The major oil producing countries, they decided to come together and decide how much oil are they going to produce, and in turn how much are they going to sell to the outer world. Based on that, the global oil prices will be decided, right? So OPEC was sorted. Then we had OPEC Plus also. So when we had OPEC, what was the need for OPEC Plus? OPEC Plus is actually more countries. OPEC Plus is the organization of OPEC plus some more countries who are also the major oil producers, but they are outside OPEC, like they are not in this core cartel. They are not these Venezuela, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and more members came in. Now we have 11 members because UAE has exited. So now we have 11 members. Earlier we had 12 members. So outside this region, outside this Middle Eastern region, there are more important players. There are major oil producing countries like Russia, right? Russia is a major oil producer that was left outside this organization. So OPEC Plus was created to include all those countries also who are major oil producers but are not a part of OPEC. So here we have countries like Russia, we have Sudan, some African countries also, Sudan, South Sudan, Bahrain, Azerbaijan, etc. So it's these 11 countries plus 10 more countries. So now we have 21 members in OPEC Plus and 11 members in OPEC. OPEC was the original core oil cartel, and OPEC Plus included all the other major oil producers as well, who were not part of OPEC. But please note that we don't have US in this. Even though it is a major shale oil producer, we do not have US as a part of this. So we have Russia, we have Azerbaijan, we have Bahrain, we have Sudan, South Sudan and some more countries, but we do not have US in OPEC plus. So this is the basic difference between OPEC and OPEC plus. UAE earlier was a member of both these organizations because these organizations are deciding the global oil prices, because the oil prices are dependent on the oil production. So they're deciding, they have these production quotas in OPEC plus also. They have these production quotas as to what, how much oil is are these countries going to produce, and do they have a spare capacity or not? Like in the times of need, can this capacity, can the buffer stock be used? So UAE in fact was a very important member because it had this spare production capacity. So it had a buffer. In fact, it had a huge oil reserve. So that's why it had this buffer also, that at the times of need, UAE can use this spare production capacity. So now UAE has exited. It has actually left both these organizations. Okay, so now we will see what can be the impact of this on the global oil production and the impact of this on India. So first of all, now because UAE has left these organizations, which means that it is not legally bound to follow any production quotas. Correct? Any production quotas. It is not legally bound. As a part or as a member of these organizations, it had to follow the production quotas, and UAE time and again raised this concern that, you know, these quotas seem very restrictive and it has a lot of reserve. So now it is not legally bound, at least it is not legally bound to follow any of the production quotas. It can decide on how much oil is it going to produce. But this does not mean that it is going to produce unlimited supply of oil. Now in the short term, definitely the production can increase. It is absolutely upon UAE to decide on what it is going to do ahead. But now because it is not legally bound with any production quotas, it can make use of its production, of its reserves, and actually start producing more in a strategic manner. Strategic increase in oil production may happen. This may happen. Now, if this happens, if there is an increase in the oil production, which means that the global oil supply is going to increase, and when the oil supply is going to increase, the prices may come down. The prices may decrease. It all will depend whether UAE decides to start producing more than the quota that it was bound to earlier. If it starts producing more, that means the global oil supply in the market is going to increase, and if the supply is going to increase, automatically the prices can decrease, it will fall, and this can provide a temporary relief to countries like India, because we are heavily import dependent on crude oil. 80, 85, 90% we are import dependent. So for countries like India, this can provide some temporary relief. So let's see what UAE decides, but this simply means that it is no longer legally bound to follow any production quotas. It can decide on how much oil does it want to produce in the short term and in the long term. So this was for the first news. Okay. All right. Now let's move on to a related news. That's for our crude oil imports. We know that the West Asian crisis is ongoing, and that's deeply impacting the global oil supply, correct? Now, because of this, our crude oil imports have also gone down. Our crude oil imports have been decreasing for the past few months, ever since this crisis began, because there is blockade, like continuous lifting of ban on putting of restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz, on the Red Sea, on the Persian Gulf. These are major energy corridors. So because there's a lot of instability in this region, our crude oil import has decreased. Okay, so the crude oil imports have slipped by 2 million tons or metric tons over January, and it has become 50% more costly. So the import has gone down, but it has become costlier. Let's look at the data over here. So India's crude oil imports dipped to some 19 million tons in March, down by 2 million tons from January and 1 million from the shorter month of February. So ever since the crisis began in February, our crude oil imports have been decreasing. So this is the figure, this is the data that tells us that the crude oil import has been decreasing. In fact, the March imports, if we talk about, they have been the lowest since July 2025. So this has been happening. Our crude oil imports are decreasing, but we say that it has become 50% costlier. Our import bill, instead of going down, it has gone up. Our crude oil import bill, this has increased. Now, why has this increased? This has increased because the unit prices for oil have increased. Even though we are importing less, but the price per unit of that oil has increased because the global oil prices are increasing. Again, what we saw in the previous article, because there is a lot of instability in the region, the global oil prices have been increasing. And when the global oil prices are increasing, the unit price, which means it's basically increasing, we'll have to pay more for the same amount of import. Even though we are importing less, in more money, we are now getting less. Right, so India paid rupees 1.2 lakh CR for March imports as opposed to 86,000 CR in January, which represents there is a 40% increase overall. So instead of the import bills coming down, the import bills have actually increased. That is why the government is so active on looking for alternatives, on actually diversifying the market and also increasing its domestic production. So our domestic production has been increasing. Our domestic production went up to 1.4 million tons. 1.4 million tons, okay. But even though it was not enough to actually meet our needs, because India, if you know, is the third biggest oil importer and consumer. So why do we import so much? Because we consume so much and the production is not enough to meet our needs. The domestic production is not enough to meet our needs. We need it for household, we need it for everything, basically for the transport sector, for everything, for electricity. So it's very important, and it's like the backbone of the economy. So that's why because India is the third biggest consumer as well as the importer of crude oil, it becomes extremely important to monitor these global oil prices, right? That's why our domestic production, even though that increased, it was not sufficient to meet our domestic needs, and that's why our import bills have also been increasing, because we still have to keep on importing, even though the import has gone down because of the blockade and the restriction and everything, but we still have to keep on importing, and we have been importing, we have been increasing our domestic production, but still it has not been up to mark. Okay. Now, if we talk about LPG production, so the government, government decided, it in fact instructed all these industry players to increase the LPG production, that you start using hydrocarbons like propane, butane, etc. to produce LPG instead of petrochemicals. So we are diverting our hydrocarbons. Why? Because household cooking is the utmost priority at the moment. Petrochemicals, industries, companies, they can all wait, but household cooking is our utmost priority. That is why the government has been, asking the companies to scale up their LPG production, divert all these hydrocarbons to LPG production, and put petrochemical production on a halt for a while. So our domestic LPG production, that increased as a result of these efforts by 20% compared with January, and 30% increase when compared with February. So that has been increasing, and our LPG imports have reduced because domestically our production is increasing to a commendable level. So imports have fell from nearly 2.2 million tons to over 0.82 million, which is a drop of more than 62%. So this is actually a huge relief, that when we talk about import of LPG has seen a drop of at least 62%. This is a great thing. But when we talk about LPG supply, okay, LPG supply, it has still suffered because we are producing more, but sector wise this LPG supply has suffered because our import has gone down significantly. We are now producing more domestically, but it will take some time for that domestic production to scale up to that level that all the demands can be met. Right now we are prioritizing households, we are prioritizing these small setups like restaurants and all these hotels that we have, so that the food is not compromised, food is available to everybody. That is our priority. Industries are not at priority, but that cannot sustain in the long run. Industries will also require this. We can only divert to for a limited amount of time because this is a crisis like situation, right? So the LPG supply sector wise has decreased. So there has been 8% decrease in the household LPG supply. This is the least hit sector because we have been prioritizing household cooking. Then nearly 50% reduction in non-household LPG supply. This is for our restaurants, this is for our hotels and everything. That is why multiple restaurants, small scale restaurants and hotels, they had to shut down because of the limited availability of LPG. So a 50% reduction has been seen in the non-household LPG supply, and the maximum cut has been seen in the bulk LPG supply. 75% cut in the bulk LPG supply. This is for the industries. This is for the companies. So they have seen the most amount of hit. They have seen a drastic hit over here because we have been prioritizing household LPG supply. So this is going to be the picture in the short run. This is what we'll be doing, that we'll first try to sustain the household cooking and then the non-household cooking, and after that we are going to focus on industries and on companies and everything. Okay, so for that, what is the government doing? We are increasing our domestic production, but there's only so much that we can produce. After that, we will have to rely on imports. So for imports, we'll have to diversify our options because the West Asia is not a great spot for imports at the moment. So for that, India has been bringing back Indian flagged LPG carriers stuck in the Persian Gulf region due to US-Israel war on Iran, right? So because these ships, they have been stuck in that region, it's very risky for them to operate, for them to carry this oil and get it back to India. The operations have become risky and they've also become uncertain. We don't know if we'll be able to, get the oil exactly back from these countries. So that's why India actually called these ships back, and now when we have called the ships back, we'll have to start looking for other options, other alternatives. So we are looking at the US, that either we send these ships to the US or we even enter into a contract with many foreign ships who are located closer to the US coast, so that they can get that oil from there, because we are in an immediate need position. We need it immediately for sending things or for sending ships from India to US. Every time is also going to increase, money is also going to increase, though that will be an option if we see that there's surplus of supply available in the US. That is also one option, but for now we have contracted with many foreign ships also to bring LPG from the US in May. Okay. So this is the crude oil import situation in India. The crude oil imports have gone down, but the prices have increased. The import bill has increased because the unit prices of oil have increased. LPG production, domestic LPG production, that has increased, but sector wise we see there is a LPG supply restriction, and which is the worst hit? It's actually the industries which are the worst hit over here. The large scale bulk LPG supply is the worst hit. And what is India doing? India is looking at diversification of options. We are looking at entering into contracts with foreign ships so that they can get us oil from the US. Okay. Now let's move on to the next important article, which is on workplace harassment. It's on TCS harassment and conversion case. So this case has been ongoing in the media for a while now, where alleged religious conversions have happened on TCS employees, and multiple FIRs, like some 9 FIRs were filed during a period of 2022 to 2026. And these are raising, bigger questions or greater concerns over workplace safety, over workplace harassment, over the role of HR, and how safe are employees in these large companies, in these large organizations. This is not a small organization. So what is the scenario inside such large organizations, and how come these things were happening for so many years? So greater questions on safety and security have been raised. So for us, it becomes important that we know what are the workplace safety guidelines, or what are the prevention of harassment guidelines at workplace. Okay. So we have the POSH Act, which is Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013, also known as POSH. Now for POSH, the Vishakha guidelines and the Bhavri Devi case of 1992. That's also important because these gave rise to these guidelines that the companies are supposed to follow in order to, make it a safe working space, make them a safe working space for female, for female employees. This is particularly for the prevention or for the protection of women, okay, at the workplace. So we have these guidelines. These guidelines talk about sexual harassment, sexual abuse of all sorts, and what can be done. How can the victim, reach to the HR? How can the victim actually reach out to these organizations? So it says that the companies will have to set up an internal complaints committee. Okay. Companies will have to set up an internal complaints committee, and this committee will look into all these cases that come up for sexual harassment, whether it is asking for any sort of a sexual favor, whether it is passing of any sexual remarks or anything of that sort. If that is being done against women, then these women can reach out to the internal complaints committee. But the timeline is of 3 months, that they will have to reach out to the internal complaints committee within 3 months of the case happening or of the incident taking place, and then an inquiry is going to be set up by this committee, and then further action will be taken based on that inquiry. So there are certain guidelines, okay, and these guidelines are about protecting women at workplace, and it's particularly about sexual harassment. And this TCS case has also brought up the same issue, that when POSH guidelines exist and there are regular compliance trainings, POSH trainings that happen at these large workplaces, then how come such things went unnoticed for like a duration of 4 years, and then the police had to intervene? Because if things are happening at, let's say, at a very initial level, it's a passing of remark or it's asking for sexual favors or anything of that sort, in that case this committee definitely is going to be very helpful. But if it is a very serious offense, if things have escalated, if it's like a sexual abuse, if it's like a sexual assault, then it will lead to what? A criminal offense, and that will be dealt under the Bharatiya Nyay Sahita, right? If it's a very serious incident. So that's why the police was also involved, because this was about forced religious conversions. It is also being named as a corporate jihad sort of a case. So there the FIR was filed and the police got involved. There's a special investigation team who's working on this. The company has actually suspended the people who are accused in these things. But then bigger questions for us are that what are these guidelines and what are the problems with these guidelines? What are the key challenges with the POSH Act that still people are not feeling safe enough, or the victims are not actually getting the desired or the required justice? So for that, we look at the key issues, but first please see that the scope here is that it applies to all these organizations, public and private sector organizations in India, including educational institutions, schools, colleges also, because there also people work, including educational institutions and unorganized sectors. In fact, the Bhavri Devi case was actually a case of a social worker who was trying to stop certain child marriages, and she was brutally gang raped. So all these things happened. That's why these guidelines, they are very comprehensive in nature. The scope is actually to cover public sector, private sector, unorganized sector, educational institutions and everything. But there are still challenges, right? So what are the challenges or the key issues with the POSH Act? First and foremost, consent versus informed consent. So right now this focuses on, the POSH Act focuses on whether or not a consent was given. So consent for it is a yes or no. Okay, somebody asked for a sexual favor and did the person say yes or no? So if the person said no and after that also it happened, then it is the person, like, it will be taken up under the POSH Act, that it was done even after not getting the consent. But what if the person said yes, but that yes was a forced yes? Was it an informed consent? Did the person actually look at all the consequences of the decision that they are making, and were they under the fear of something, like if they will not say yes, then they will not get promoted, or they'll leave their job, they'll have to lose their job, or anything of that sort? Was there an indirect pressure on them? So this is the concept of informed consent. POSH right now focuses on consent, just a yes or no consent, but it does not actually dive into the deeper meaning of consent, that is informed consent. Was this decision made in in a complete awareness, in a completely aware manner, that the consequences, I am aware of the consequences and I'm not afraid of anything, I'm not under any indirect pressure, because there is hierarchy in the workplaces, right? It's a boss and employee sort of a setup. There is hierarchy. So is that consent actually an informed consent or not? On that, the POSH Act is silent. Then the limitation period, I told you in the beginning, the limitation period is of 3 months, that the victim can raise this complaint within 3 months of the incident taking place. But many a times these things are more complicated. Okay, the 3 months timeline can pass because things can keep happening one after the other, and the person might feel that, okay, I should not speak up right now, let's wait for some more time, let's wait for the things to subside, or this might be a one-off incident. Anything can happen. So in that case, the limitation period actually binds the victim, that it does not give the victim that freedom to reach out to the ICC, Internal Complaints Committee. Then the burden of proof is also lying on the victim at the moment. The victim will have to prove everything, that okay, this happened, these were the circumstances and that this happened. So it's also an undignified thing to do, right? Because the burden of proof should not be on the victim. The victim is suffering or has suffered. So in that case, this should not fall upon the victim. But right now it does. Then the most important part over here is that POSH deals with sexual harassment only, but not all harassment is sexual harassment. There is also emotional harassment, psychological harassment, non-verbal harassment. So sexual harassment is one very major concept with which POSH deals, but it is silent on the other forms of harassment. It needs to be more comprehensive in its approach, that it has to take care of or take into consideration different other forms of mental harassment, emotional harassment, psychological harassment as well. And right now this is also not gender neutral. It is about the prevention, it is about the protection of women. So that's also something that we can look forward to, and also the inclusion of different types of harassment under POSH. Okay, so that was for the third article. Now let's move on to the next important article, wherein 9,400 accounts have been banned after dedicated probe found links to digital arrests. So the WhatsApp sent this document in Supreme Court. Now what happened? Digital arrest cases are increasing in India, right? And that's why a couple of months ago, the Honorable Supreme Court of India took suo motu cognizance of this matter, that why are the digital arrest cases rising so much? What is the issue? What is the challenge? And people, or let's say these cyber bullies, they have become so professional in making use of AI and deepfakes and everything, that they are able to trick anybody, almost anybody. And a lot of financial damage is happening, emotional damage is also happening. So many things are happening. That's why the Supreme Court took suo motu cognizance of this, and in response, WhatsApp actually sent a document wherein it said that it had banned 9,400 accounts. After carrying out an investigation, WhatsApp found that there were 9,400 accounts that were linked to each other, and they were responsible for digital arrests. So these accounts were banned. Okay. And what is WhatsApp doing? So WhatsApp is working on SIM binding. So it also said, WhatsApp basically said that there are 1 or 2 things that it has been working in order to comply with the IT rules. So it is working on SIM binding. SIM binding meaning physically binding like the WhatsApp with SIM on your device. Right now what happens? You just need an OTP, right, for registration or for logging into the WhatsApp account. Even on WhatsApp web, there are many linked devices. You basically do not require the SIM to be physically present in the device in order for WhatsApp to function. Correct. So now what WhatsApp is doing, that it is working on SIM binding, so that if in any case there is a physical removal of SIM and that SIM is placed in any other mobile, in any other phone, then it will be able to track that transfer. And this tracking is actually very important. It might look insignificant, but it is not. When such digital scams happen, digital arrests happen, this tracking of even small data, all this small metadata also becomes extremely important. That is why WhatsApp, one, is working on SIM binding, and then it is also working on the identification and labeling of synthetically generated information. Synthetically generated information, SGI, like your deepfakes. Deepfake video, deepfake audio, anything that is AI generated, anything that is not real. So it is working on the identification of that data also. And whenever that kind of a data is found by WhatsApp, that label will have to be provided, identification and labeling. Label that it is AI generated, so that people don't fall into trap of such things. So these are certain things that WhatsApp is doing to reduce the cases of digital arrest in India and to comply with the IT laws. And it said that it banned these 9,400 accounts. So we know, end-to-end encryption. End-to-end encryption is there for our WhatsApp messages, but metadata is something that can be monitored. Now, with the help of metadata only, WhatsApp was able to find that these 94 accounts are actually linked to each other. How are these accounts linked to each other? Because it studied the metadata. Metadata is nothing but it's the data about data. Data about data, like your messages end-to-end are encrypted. WhatsApp cannot read your messages, okay, but metadata is something like from which device was this message sent, what was the frequency of what is the frequency of such kinds of messages coming up between these two people or these three people, or what was the IP address, or basically all the auxiliary information that is related to data. The message cannot be read, what is inside that message cannot be read, but metadata, the data that is around that data, or the data that is around the original message, that can be tracked, and this tracking becomes extremely helpful. And with the help of metadata only, WhatsApp was able to identify that these 9,400 accounts are linked to each other. They are working on a similar behavioral pattern, on a similar pattern. So it was able to ban these 9,400 accounts. So for us, it becomes extremely important that we are aware of such digital arrest. Digital arrest is not possible. It is not legal in India. No arrest can happen over a video call or over a phone call. Only physical arrests can happen. So we need to spread awareness around that as well. Okay. Now let's move on to the last article for today, which is around Air India, Indigo, SpiceJet seeking ATF price relief because they say that the airline industry is on the verge of stopping operations. So everything is linked. Okay, we started with the global oil prices. Now, because the global oil prices are increasing, ATF prices are also increasing. ATF prices also depend on a couple of other things. We'll see that. But this is also one of the major contributors, and the ATF prices are increasing. And that is actually increasing the operational costs for these airlines. And that's why the airlines have been, pleading to the government that you give us some relief on the ATF prices. Because what can they do? They cannot exactly, increase their ticket price or to a significant amount. Slight increase can happen, but not a great or a huge amount can be increased. And right now, some 40% of operations, let's say, or 40% of all the money that is required is actually dependent on ATF prices. Fuel is a major component of the operational cost. Basically 40% of the operational cost is around the fuel prices, ATF prices. So if that price keeps on increasing or decreasing, then operation becomes very, very difficult, because if that price is increasing significantly, the airline will have to do something to counter that price, but it cannot increase the ticket price in the same manner in the same proportion. That's why it has been pleading to the government. So let's see what's happening over here. So the Federation of Indian Airlines, which represents Air India, Indigo, SpiceJet, has warned that the sector is under extreme stress, and some airlines are even on the verge of shutting down because operations are becoming very, very expensive. So what are they proposing? They are saying that please follow a crack band pricing mechanism similar to the one introduced during COVID-19. Now what happens? The price of ATF is actually decided, one, on the global oil price, global crude oil price. Now this crude oil cannot directly be used as an ATF, refining will need to happen. So this refining is done by the major oil companies, okay, oil companies like Indian Oil, BPCL, HPCL, etc. Major oil companies are going to refine this oil, right? And then refine this oil, convert it into ATF, and then the government is also going to levy some tax. So there are taxes by the government, tax by the government, and VAT is also there by the state government. VAT is also imposed by the state government, because right now this is not under GST, correct? ATF is not under GST. So that's why this VAT applies to it, and VAT is going to vary state by state. So these things are actually deciding the price of ATF, and it has been, you know, the industry is basically saying that you please work on this part and on this part. Global oil prices are increasing, we know there's not much that we can do about it, but when we talk about the oil refineries, oil companies, here whatever crack spread they have or whatever profit they are making, spread is actually the profit. So the crack spread, the profit that they are making in refining this, that should be reduced, that should actually be capped, and that is the crack band pricing mechanism, that you cap the spread of the oil companies. One, when this is capped, a limit is placed, then it's going to decrease the price over here, the profit over here is going to decrease. And secondly, there is a request that either you please put it under GST or you work on reducing the VAT by different state governments, either complete, you know, removal, or at least if not removal, then at least you know, reduce the VAT, reduce the taxes, cut down on the taxes, or provide subsidies, direct subsidies, because the airlines cannot just disproportionately increase the flight prices. So maybe provide some direct subsidy to them. So these are certain things that the airlines have been saying. Let's see what is accepted by the government and what is not. But it is not an exaggeration to say that airlines are actually under extreme stress because of operational costs increasing. Okay, so that was all for today's discussion. Now we will look at a practice question for prelims. Any questions, please let me know. Alright, so you can read newspapers in the normal way, in the regular format, like whatever important news we are covering, the important news in our analysis section, and then throughout the day there are also other important news that we cover on our channel. You can go ahead and watch those videos also, and there are certain things that are always in news. You can, you know, keep an eye for the international affairs. You can exclude the political affairs, keep an eye out on the international affairs, on the economic affairs, very, very important for the examination. Okay, now let's look at a practice question for prelims. But before we do that, this is the Studio GS Foundation live online course. Now this is a foundation course, so your complete prelims and main syllabus is going to be completed in 14 months in the 1250 plus hours of classes that you are getting, printed class notes and a live chat facility during the classes. So all of this you are getting at 34,999 rupees. And you can also use a coupon code SALONI to avail a further discount on this fee. Okay, so for any information, please call us at 87501 and you can also download the Drishti Learning app. Now the question for today is, with reference to global crude oil governance, consider the following statements. 1. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries was formed to coordinate petroleum policies and stabilize oil prices among member countries. 2. OPEC Plus was created to include both OPEC members and major non-OPEC oil producers to enhance global supply coordination. And 3. The United States is a member of OPEC Plus due to its large shale oil production capacity. Which of the following, which of the statements given above is or are correct? A, 1 and 3 only, B, 1 and 2 only, C, 2 and 3 only, or D, 1, 2 and 3. Please attempt this question and provide your answers in the comment section. Thank you for watching, and we will meet in a new video.